is Zeu Li. I'm the founder and CEO of Essence Educational Company. Welcome. Today I'm going to give you an introduction about the GMAT courses we're going to give. Firstly, what is GMAT? GMAT is a test they need to take in order to get MBA degrees in North America, especially those top MBA schools in the US. It is composed of 4 parts: math, verbal, analytical writing assessment, and integrated reasoning. It is a test that tries to test your ability to do analytical and quantitative reasoning together with your knowledge on formal English grammar. One more thing worth mentioning is that it is a test with very strict time constraints. So meaning that in order to get your desired score, you really need to do proper preparation. The next question naturally follows is, how do you prepare in order to get a decent GMAT score? We believe there are 5 factors that are influencing your GMAT score or any other test score like a GRE or SAT. So these factors are: first, related knowledge; second, strategies to solve problems; then degree of adroitness; then authentic simulation; and finally, luck. So let's go one by one. First, related knowledge. In the GMAT math part, for example, you need to know the theory about set. You need to know what's combination, what's permutation. You need to know related theorems. In the critical reasoning and reading comprehension part, you also need to know knowledge about formal logic, like method of difference and method of agreement, in order to conquer them. Let me give you a concrete example about related knowledge. Here is a critical reasoning question. Half of the subjects in experiment, the experimental group, eat large quantities of a popular food additive. Afterwards, this group showed higher tendency of having stomachache than did the other half of the subjects, the controlled group, who did not consume the additive. The detrimental effects were attributed to an amino acid that is one of the additive's main constituents. Which of the following, if true, would best support the conclusion that some ingredients of the additive was responsible for the experimental results? So after you read this passage, let's first introduce to you the knowledge about formal logic. Here is something in formal logic called method of difference. So method difference is a way in formal logic to try to discover causal relationship between events. It requires 2 situations. In situation 1, event A, B, C, and D happen, and then afterwards small a happens. And in situation 2, B, C, D continue to happen, but capital A does not happen. In the meanwhile, small a does not happen afterwards. Then, by comparing these 2 situations, you can draw a conclusion, which is capital A is the cause of the small a. So, by using this as a framework, we can easily understand the passage we just read. So basically, it's also composed of 2 situations: the experimental group and the control group. In the experimental group, capital A represents all the subjects eat a lot of a food additive, whereas in controlled group, they didn't do that, so big A doesn't happen. And then, in situation 1, in the experimental group, people have stomachache, that's small a, whereas in situation 2, for the control group, they don't have that problem. Then the passage draws a conclusion that the food additive is the cause of the stomachache. So this framework. And then the question is asking which of the following choices best supports the conclusion that there is a causal relationship. So in the method of difference, there is one critical requirement that capital A is the only difference in 2 situations. In other words, all the other factors remain the same. Then the only difference should be the reason. That's also why it's called method of difference. So before even we read the choices, we should expect the result. The choice that is supporting should be the one that is saying, except for eating the food additive, the two groups, all the other factors such as age, gender, and so on, should be equivalent. Let's take a look at choice D. Nobody from the two groups of subjects had stomach problems prior to the experiment. So basically, this is to say that in the situation 1, in the experimental group, none of them have stomach problem before. In the situation 2, control group, none of them have stomach problem before. So the same. So basically, the other situation, the other factors are the same. So exactly what we talk about. So this is how the related knowledge method of difference can help you to solve GMAT problem. It is the responsibility of the teacher of Essence Educational Company to teach you all related knowledge. Then, if a student know all the knowledge needed to conquer the exam, still he may fail in the GMAT test because he may not know how to use this knowledge properly in order to conquer the test. That comes to our second factor, strategies to solve the problems. First example, in reading comprehension. In my previous experience as a GMAT teacher, many of my students couldn't do well in the reading comprehension part simply because they don't have enough time to solve all the questions. For instance, they read a passage which takes them about 5 minutes, then they begin to solve the questions. But when they start the questions, they begin to feel, oh, this needs something I don't remember where it is. Then they come back to the passage, reread it, find out the information, and solve the question. And they do the same for the second question, third question, and so on and so forth. Say they need 5 minutes for the passage, 3 minutes for each question, then 5 questions totally will cost them 20 minutes. But actually, GMAT gives only about 13 minutes to finish. That's what I mentioned before, time constraint. So one of the things we are going to teach in the GMAT is called Zeyu's reading method. This is a method I created to help people to solve the problem above mentioned. How? So the main idea of this method is by using the knowledge like method of difference, formal logical knowledge, you try to understand and remember the structure of the passage, the logical tree of the passage, before you solve the questions. Once you master the logical tree, first, for all these questions about the main idea, the structure of the passage, those become very easy questions for you. Then, even for questions asking for details in the passage, because you know the logical tree, and then you know exactly which paragraph, which line to find out that information. That rereading process is very fast. That's why people can solve the reading comprehension problems very fast by using this approach. We can even guarantee you, after using this method, you can conquer all GMAT reading comprehension problems timely and correctly. Now let me give you a second example in the math part. Basically, we are going to teach you 3 strategies: translation, specification, and paying attention to the purpose. By using this strategy, you can solve all GMAT mathematical problems you are going to face. I will give you a concrete example by using the first strategy, translation. Here is a GMAT mathematical question. One train leaves town A and goes directly towards town B at a constant rate. And another train leaves town B at the same time and heads directly for town A at a constant rate. If the first train arrives in town B 5 hours later, and the second train arrives in town A 3 hours later, how much time passed before the distance separating the trains was equal to 1/3 the distance between town A and town B before they meet each other? So after read the questions, so you see this is a question filled with English words. That comes to our first strategy, translation. What does it mean? In the history, mathematicians designed a lot of letters, notations, figures to represent different mathematical concepts. These are what we call mathematical language. Why they created? Because these notations are very precise and can help us to facilitate our thinking process. So our first suggestion whenever you see a mathematical problem filled with English words, the first thing you should do is translate them into mathematical language by, for instance, draw a figure by using a letter to represent the unknown. Here, concretely, in this example, as you can see, let's go one sentence by sentence. One train leaves from town A and to town B at a constant rate. Do you know the rate? No, it's the unknown. As we said, to translate, you use letters to represent the unknown. So we say, okay, this train moves 8 kilometers per hour, moving from A to B. You draw a figure. Then the second sentence. Another train leaves town B at the same time and heads directly for town A at a constant rate. Do you know the rate of this train? No. Continue to use a letter to represent it. We say, train B moves at B kilometers per hour towards town A. Then we continue. If the first train arrives in town B 5 hours later, how to translate this sentence? So, first train moves at 8 kilometers per hour. After 5 hours, what's the distance it travels? Simply 8 times 5. So 8 times 5 is equal to the distance, AB, as you can see. Then the second train arrives in town A 3 hours later. Similar, very similar. So B kilometers per hour, 3 hours is also equal to AB. So B times 3 equal to AB. Then the question is, how much time passed before the distance separating the trains was equal to 1/3 the distance between town A and town B before they meet each other? So it's asking you for time. Do you know the time? No. Use a letter. Say T. After T hours. After T hours, so the first train moves A times T kilometers, right? And second train moves B times T kilometers. As you can see here in this figure you draw, here's the distance separating them is 1/3 AB. Then you can easily write an equation from the figure, right? A times T, which is the distance the first traveled, plus 1/3 AB plus B times T is equal to AB. So the whole question now can be translated basically into 3 equations, right? And the last thing we need to do for those 3 equations, we have standard steps to solve those equations in math, which you will learn in the multiple variable equations, linear equations. You will learn that knowledge. This is something very easy. The only thing you need to do is to use A, B to represent the other unknown, A and B, and then plug them into the third equation. And here you go. Put A equal to AB divided by 5, B equal to AB divided by 3 into the third one. And you have this equation, AB divided by 5 times T, blah, blah, equal to AB. And you can divide by AB on both sides of the equation. And you simplify this equation. Finally, you solve the problem. T is equal to 1 hour and 15 minutes. So basically, you choose C. That was the second factor, strategies to solve problem. As we said, this is also the responsibility of the teachers, i.e. Essence Educational Company, to teach you this part. Then it comes to the third factor, which is the degree of adroitness. What do we mean? So basically, you need to be extremely familiar with related knowledge, the first one, and the strategies to solve problems, the second one, such that they kind of become your instinct. You are using these two without even recognizing you are using them. Then you can get a good score in the GMAT. From my experience, those who can get an outstanding GMAT score are those who can solve simple problems quickly and correctly. And then they have time to ponder, to think about the difficult ones. This is what we mean by the degree of adroitness. That's the third factor. Then the fourth one is called authentic simulation. So basically, we suggest that first, before you do any preparation of the exam, you take a simulated test. So by taking the test, you are going to have a score. I'm pretty much sure that you're going to have a lousy score. And this is to remind you that this test is difficult. It's try to tell you, do not underestimate your enemy. This is the first purpose. And during the preparation, we also suggest you to take one or a few simulated tests. By using these tests, you begin to find out what are your weaknesses. Maybe you don't have enough knowledge. Maybe you don't use the strategies we teach you well. Maybe you don't have enough practices. Only after you find those weaknesses can you tackle them and can you make progress. And lastly, before you take the exam, we also recommend you take a few simulated tests, as similar as possible to the real test. By doing so, is try to help you to build your confidence. If you get, say, 3 simulated tests in a row, excellent scores, why should you be nervous in the final exam? Many students complain to me they have a psychological problem when they take the final exam. From my experience, I believe that those who feel nervous in the exam are typically those who subconsciously know they didn't prepare well enough. So by using these simulated exams, you can help you to build confidence. Then you don't have the problem anymore. So the last factor that is influencing your GMAT score is luck. Unfortunately, luck plays a role everywhere. So in this case, maybe you get sick the day before you take the test, or maybe you press the wrong button during the test. But as it's not under our control, so therefore we can leave it alone. So let me re-summarize the 5 factors. So for the related knowledge and strategies to solve problems, it's a responsibility for us, for the teachers, and third, the company, to teach you. But you need to really do a lot of practices and simulated tests in order to improve your degree of adroitness and to improve your confidence of taking the test. Lastly, let me introduce you the method of concentration. As you can see from the chart, the x-axis is time, the y-axis is efficiency. As you can see, for the first 1 or 2 hours, basically, your level of efficiency is pretty low. This is because some people are interfering you, or because you were continuously reviewing what you learned yesterday. So then afterwards, your level of efficiency starts to climb. And so from this chart, we basically recommend that you spend roughly 5 to 7 hours on a certain subject in GMAT, so that you can have a large portion of your time at relatively high efficiency level. So that's all for today's introduction to our GMAT courses. If you're interested, you are welcome to visit our website at www.essence-edu.com. So we have the latest GMAT course information there, and I hope you like it. Thank you very much.